All right, sit down, shut up. We need to talk about 9/11. Nobody ever wants to have a conversation about 9/11. I am the only one brave enough to do it. I am the only one brave enough to bring it up. And let me just tell you this. That cartoon dog was right. 9/11 changed everything. And instead of having a productive conversation about it, we sit around and we assign blame. Well, here's what I'll tell you. We are all to blame. And this is something I live with every day of my life. The terrible notion that I could have stopped 9/11. And of course I could have. I absolutely could have prevented it. Quite simply, I would have locked the doors and made everyone late for work. Case closed. Done. Solved. But nobody ever wants to have that conversation. Nobody ever wants to take responsibility for what happened. But I'll tell you this. There are some people in this world, in this country even, who are grateful for 9/11. I am referring, of course, to the TSA. Because even though I hate to admit it, 9/11 created jobs. And the TSA is thrilled about it. They are tickled pink that because of 9/11, they now get to stand under fluorescent lights for 8 hours making minimum wage. The TSA Corps members, or the X-ray machine mafia, as they are known to insiders of big airline, is comprised of anti-Americans, foot fetishists, and worst of all, aspiring radiologists. And of course, it all makes perfect sense. Think about it. Why do you think you have to take off your shoes and then stand barefoot in those long lines? For your health? No. They are humiliating you. Even Tarantino would think it was too far. That is why I steadfastly refuse to remove my shoes at TSA unless I am compensated with a pre-check and a day-old Auntie Anne's pretzel, because I know my worth. Now, as for the great value X-ray technicians, I don't trust them, okay? I didn't come to TSA to be experimented on. Let me out of this radiation box, Dr. Mengele. But the worst of it, I think, is when they find something to latch onto. A few months ago, I was in the airport for an early morning flight, and I had accidentally left my house keys in my pocket. Immediately, I was yanked unceremoniously from the radiation machine by a member of the TSA, with very little warning. Her hands were on my ass. She said to me, "Ma'am, do you have something back here you're not supposed to?" I looked at her proudly in the eye and I said, "Only what God gave me." She did not laugh. She didn't think it was funny. Now, because I am an incredible wit and a comedic genius, I thought to myself, what would be the appropriate thing to do in this situation? Would be to double down. Tell another joke. She didn't get the first one. Maybe she'll get the second one. So with her hands still on my ass, I said, "Ma'am, won't you at least take me to dinner first?" And that is how I got myself randomly selected. And so the TSA, the tormentors, the primary oppressors of our society, were glad for 9/11. And they remain glad. If I may be so bold, I would like to posit to you that perhaps 9/11 was planned and perpetrated by the true enemies of the state, the Transportation Security Administration. And every time I walk through those crowd control stanchions with my perfect ass, it infuriates them. Because I represent something bigger than what they stand for. And I don't just mean these cheeks. I am talking about a society in which TSA did not exist. They were not permitted to oppress us. Their incredibly transparent New World Order had not yet taken hold of our society by the throat. And ultimately, not only did they take from us our beloved towers, they took from us our freedom. When our founding fathers cobbled together the Constitution, they could not have envisioned a society in which I would be deterred and dissuaded from making a series of uncomfortable jokes to a minimum wage TSA agent. And frankly, they would have been horrified to find out that that has been my fate. And now, whenever I find myself in TSA security screening, ass cheeks clapping like a crowbar striking a metal garbage can, to honor the victims of 9/11 and our founding fathers, I strip off all my clothes except for my shoes, and I drape myself in an American flag, as is my right. And anyone who would criticize me for taking on that form of particularly poetic political protest is not only denigrating me as a person, they are also insulting the United States of America as a whole. Now let me just say this. Despite what the TSA has subjected us to as a community, and indeed as a broader society, there are a select few individuals who, in my mind, stand as the uncontested heroes of 9/11. Now, of course, there were the firefighters, the paramedics, the people who came together in the city to wash each other's laundry and brush ash off each other's shoulders. But I don't really care about them. Because, of course, as we all know, the true hero of 9/11 was Michael Bloomberg. Bloomberg waltzed in January 1st, 2002, swept New York City into his arms, and individually gave us each a metaphorical kiss on the forehead. And for the first time, we felt safe again. Until he instituted stop and frisk. Now, of course, Bloomberg was charged with dealing with the long-term consequences of 9/11. But in the short term, we had Giuliani, who is a genius. He was a genius then, when he was fucking his cousin, and he's a genius now, even though they're divorced. And it is the politicians, not the people, that are truly important in establishing a collective memory of events here. Because we all already know that I have been blessed with a perfect ass. TSA has made sure that information has been disseminated. What is less intuitive is the role politicians like Bloomberg played and continue to play in hauling this country back to its feet. Whether or not we want to credit him for that, it is Michael Bloomberg who healed this nation from 9/11. Now, why was that his responsibility? How did we get to that point? Well, the answer is deceptively simple, and it goes much further up than we might ever imagine. It all started with Bush and Cheney. For decades, Bush has been in the pocket of big radiology. Of course, George W. Bush is renowned not only for his incredibly sharp wit, but also for his ironclad foreign policy. And that is why this incredible tragedy was so shocking. The NRA tried to warn Bush for years that we were in danger. He wouldn't hear it. Wayne LaPierre, the hero that he is, even went so far as to offer to arm the World Trade Center. Unfortunately, his valiant efforts were a massive failure, because even though the spirit of New York City breathed a life of its own into the World Trade Center, skyscrapers are still non-sentient beings and therefore cannot be issued licenses for firearms. Now, Bush's dubious connections to Big X-ray may not have posed a threat by themselves, even though it is clear to those of us with a lick of sense that allowing maniacs to wield X-ray equipment can only result in horror and tragedy. But it was this, coupled with Cheney's connection to the big airline foot fetishists, that placed the life of every American in danger. And of course Halliburton, which is widely known for its generosity, tried desperately to warn Cheney. In fact, it is a matter of public record that well in advance of the terror attacks, the NRA and Halliburton had realized that the medical radiation industry and air travel companies had teamed up to form a formidable illicit group that was intent on world domination. This early iteration of the TSA manipulated our innocent Bush administration, and they were successful. They targeted Bush, they targeted Cheney, they drove them apart, and what resulted was the biggest catastrophe this nation has ever seen. Bush and Cheney were like Mario and Luigi, and everybody knew it, and that is what made them susceptible. And people blame them fully for the incident. They say, look, jet fuel cannot melt steel beams, which is true. But when the TSA built the Twin Towers, they used subpar materials on purpose, knowing this day would come. So you can sit there like sheep and blame Bush and blame Cheney, but the truth is this: I am not like the other girls. I would love to be waterboarded by Cheney. I would welcome it because I understand what it means to be a patriot, and I understand the value of being well informed. And furthermore, I have been listening to Wayne LaPierre for years. A fact which I think is obvious to all of us. And I'll tell you another thing. We will never be safe. We are never as far away from another 9/11 as you think we are. We have become complacent. We have become myopic. And we have chosen to subject ourselves to the wiles of radiology technicians for years. Because of 9/11, the Bush administration disintegrated. Not even Bloomberg could save it. The Mario and Luigi of Washington, D.C. became the Bowser and Toad of Washington, D.C., completely out of sync. Is it any wonder, then, that they were subsequently replaced by Barack Obama and Joe Biden, two of the most in-sync politicians since the band NSYNC? Now, some people, my haters, will take this opportunity to inform you that it was in fact term limits that prevented George Bush and Dick Cheney from serving 4 more years in office. And that's very convenient, isn't it? But the truth is, the TSA is more influential in our society than any of us could possibly understand. Have you ever had an X-ray? They've got you. Have you ever boarded a flight? They've got you. Have you ever taken off your shoes? They've got you. That is why I have encased my feet in cement a la Bill Hader's character in Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, because nobody sees my feet for free. And ultimately, things are bleak. Bloomberg can't save us every time. Giuliani is running out of cousins to fuck, and my house has been overrun with bags of concrete mix. It is as Lenin once said. Well, Lenin actually said 2 pertinent things. First he said, "Что делать?" What is to be done? And then he said, "Will you take my body off display, you fucking nutcases?" And in both instances, he was right. In fact, he was prophetic, some might say. Now, I'm not sure I agree with his ideas about socialized medicine, because, as an introvert, I don't want to be forced to be friendly to people at the doctor. But because Lenin was a socialist, and therefore believed it was his duty to be amiable to all people of the world, I think he and Wayne LaPierre would have gotten along wonderfully, and their philosophies together could have prevented 9/11. Of course, it is too late to prevent the initial 9/11 terror attacks. But it is not too late to prevent the ones that are coming next. And therefore, I beseech you, keep a close eye on the TSA. Keep a close eye on your radiologists. And keep a close eye on your own feet, because you never know when they could be swept out from under you. Stay safe out there. Good night.